All right, cool. So in answer to your question, the reason that it didn't work yet in the VMH or in Slack is that it's not in the actual VMH yet. So I've talked about this before, but this is Visual Studio Code, and this is the thing that we use to test everything and make sure that it works. So we're looking at, no problems have been detected in the workspace. That's good. So what I do, and you can kind of see these over here, all of these are arrays. Each individual line is a super, super long array. And all these elements, right? So each one of these individual things over here gets turned into an individual element inside of one of these arrays, and they're all separated by, quotes, and then there's like commas in between. So if we look at actually, this whole thing, you can kind of see here's M1, and the first question goes all the way through to here, partial credit, blah, 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 and then there's a quote, and then comma to separate the next element, and here's the next, so M1.2, and it goes, and then there's a quote, comma, quote to separate. Now we have the thought, the first thought, and then quote, comma, quote to separate, that. So basically you have commas separating things that are surrounded by quotes, so this thought is like one element inside the array, and this thing is one element inside this array. Okay, so we've got all these things over here. So what I do is I take this thing that you make and I find and replace. Anytime there are two enters, and this is why I do it this way, there's exactly two enters, I'm going to replace that with quote, comma, quote. It could be one enter or just as easily like something else, but if it were only one enter, it would just be harder to see like all this stuff because everything would be jam-packed together. So we make it two because we also sometimes use this for, an answer key or just like to be able to edit the array and look at it and it doesn't suck. So I replace all the enters with quote, comma, quote, replace all. Cool. Okay. And then I take this thing and I copy it and I put it into here. And I see if it has any issues. Now it does, right? And you can see that as soon as you put something in, it has a problem. It like everything else underneath it loses its mind, like totally freaks out. So we've got an issue here. Now it's usually pretty easy to see. And the issue was that this question, so M22.7, it didn't have enough spaces, and so it didn't get a quote, comma, quote. Instead, it just has like one enter instead of two, and so it ends up like just the second row, but then it breaks the entire array. So M22, as it's written here, doesn't actually end. So if we go to the end of this, there's like no ending. It just ends in a period instead of this ending bracket that we need. And then if we go to the beginning here, this starts with like nothing, right? So it doesn't, there's no like VAR, like it has nothing to tell it what to do. So I'm going to undo this and take this out so that the VMH can calm down. It's going to just fix itself. All that got messed up is real fun. So, and then I'm going to hit undo over here. So I go to M22.7 and I can see that even though it looks like there's a space, there's not. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm a super stickler for this thing right here. So we go to home, inside the paragraph thing, there's this little symbol, and we get those line spacing options, and we make sure everything is 0 points before, 0 points after, and single spacing. And when we do that, now it's very easy to see that clearly there are not enough spaces in between question 6 and 7. So I'm going to hit enter there. Now there's going to be exactly enough spaces. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go back to the replace. And I'm going to do that. Copy, and when I put it in here now, boom, totally works, right? Super fancy. So I can just go ahead and save this thing, and then all will be well, right? So that's the whole thing. That's kind of all you need to know about that. You don't have to obviously work with the VSC, so this part you don't really ever see, but just to give you an idea of what I do after you finish this thing, and then obviously I'm going to undo that and save it this way because this is the way that we want it to be saved. But so that's the process, and so that is how we troubleshoot. Now that it's in this VSC over here, okay, so it is in here, it still has to go through one more step before it's actually in the official live version, right? So this is our current edited version, but the current live version that's actually deployed in Slack is not this one, right? It's a different one. So still if I type in M22.1, it's not going to come up here, although it wouldn't usually anyways. It would come up here, but it doesn't. Whenever we redeploy next, which happens on the Google console, then it'll be a thing, but we're not quite redeploying yet. So yeah, that's the whole thing, and there we go.